Hi everyone, so in today's video, I'm going to be chatting a little bit about why writing for yourself will make you a better writer. So this is going to be going over some misconceptions as well as some truths, at least the truths that I've experienced, as well as my own journey with writing for myself. The title of this video is going to sound more prescriptive than I mean for it to be. As you always know, here's my disclaimer for this video. I'm an advocate for doing whatever the hell you want when it comes to writing. I think that as writers, we all have the autonomy to make the decisions that work best for us. So this video is going to be talking about why you may consider writing for yourself, but that doesn't mean that you have to, and I'm certainly not preaching anything that everybody needs to take as gospel. There's also absolutely nothing wrong with writing for other people. If that's what brings you joy, you do you. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal journey with deciding that I didn't need to publish my work. I decided this at a very young age. So if you didn't know, I began writing seriously from when I was 12 years old at a very young age, and I'm talking at about age 14. I came to this conclusion that writing for yourself is super cool and just as cool as writing for publication. I answered an ask a few months ago on my blog about how I got to the journey of where I am with this series that I'm writing called Fostered. So if you didn't know, Fostered is the second book that I ever wrote, and it is the first in a multi-book series. The series has 6 main series books and currently 2 spin-offs, so 8 books. It's about 1 million words, so I've been writing it for a really long time. So let's jump into how I got from wanting to publish the series so bad, get a movie deal, and be super famous, to writing it for myself. I'll read the ask that I answered just so you have a good idea of the story. So let's start with the beginning, which was 2014. A few days after I turned 13, I started a book called Fostered. After the first book was written, I decided I wanted more from the series and embarked on writing a book 2. Writing book 2 was a blissful experience. It was so fun, it was entertaining, and very quickly it turned into me writing a book 3 as the plot grew and as I grew fonder of the characters. All 3 of these novels began at the age of 13, and I know, it's pretty insane. So the next part of my journey is called Crossing the Threshold, because obviously I'm a writer, I'm going to make fun of the hero's journey. I was itching to publish book 1. After all, I'd spent so much time writing book 2, and I was in the middle of writing book 3 at this point, and I wanted to share this story with the world. I envisioned films, the whole dystopian in 2014 shebang thing, and so began Operation Publish Fostered, which is the next step. I did a lot of research. I loved Googling things when I was 13. It's definitely carried over to now I'm almost 20. I was disheartened to find out that writing the series first and then querying was not optimal, according to literary agents at the time, but I felt confident in my ability to sell the series. Like, okay, girl, you do it, honestly. At the time, I asked literary agents whether or not this was destined to fail. I wrote a lot, I Googled a lot, like I said, and publishing was a really exciting thing. But then I realized no one wanted to publish this book. It's not that I ever got rejected writing Fostered. Fostered didn't even get into the editing stage. Nevertheless, it didn't get into the querying stage. Nobody rejected this book. But at around the 2015 mark, I started Fostered in late 2014. YA dystopian nosedived into very dead territory. It was like extremely dead. Nobody wanted to look at it. And it was industry standard at the time, basically, that it was a very difficult sell due to extreme success in other YA dystopians that had blown up in the early 2010s, such as The Hunger Games and Divergent. Guys, I was crushed. I was so in denial. I kept asking around, seeing, hey, does my book sound like it's YA dystopian? At that time, there was a literary agency who answered asks on Tumblr. And so I would always send in things being like, does my book sound like it's a dystopian, knowing that it was a dystopian? I brainstormed ways I could change up the idea to strip away the dystopian and get my day in court in publishing. But nothing could strip the typical 2014 YA dystopian from this very typical YA dystopian book. So this leads us to the next stage, which was Approach the Inmost Cave, 2015. I was really sad figuring out all of this gut-wrenching information. At 13, I destined myself for blockbuster, yet kind of humble success. And at this point, I just started grade 9. And so began my descent into never finishing book 3. It's not that I didn't want to finish the book. I really, really did. I love it so much. And you guys know that that's actually my favorite book I've ever written. I wasn't going to finish it. My dilemma with publishing or not publishing was something I didn't know how to navigate around. And at that point, I developed extensively as a writer, despite writing for less than a year, and I knew the first book didn't hold up to the quality of the second and the third. But for some reason, I lost my fostered spark at a point in book 3 where I thought everything was going wonderfully. One day, I was enjoying writing so much, and then the next, I couldn't figure out the next sentence to this story. I hit an unforeseen roadblock, and I didn't know what caused it. I didn't know how to move around it, and I had to actually give up on the series for a bit. To my dismay, it was really heartbreaking. I tried everything to fix the problem, like rereading the book, which was literally like 150,000 words at that point, switching point of view characters, doing the whole lot, and nothing worked. And so with all of this in mind, and also understanding the industry truly wouldn't be interested in this series no matter what, I was led to the next step in this story, which was 2016's rewriting the Fostered trilogy like a fucking boss. This was a letter that I'd written myself at age 14. So I wrote, "These characters were your life and you legitimately loved them and still do with all your heart. You want to give them a second chance." And at this point, I was at a bit of a crossroads. I did want to rewrite the trilogy to publish it, but my main motivator at that point in time, when I was so down and out, was that I desperately missed this story that had brought me so much joy the year previous. I hardly thought about publishing in that moment, or the research I'd done on all those literary agencies, and that all started mattering less when I realized I was at risk of never being able to write the story that I absolutely loved ever again. Though I still had ideas to publish, like consolidating all 3 books into one, my main motivator in this plan of action was to spark joy with this project again. So that leads us to the switch. And I never did rewrite the Fostered trilogy according to plan. Never. I didn't follow the steps to rewrite the Franken-Fostered, as I'm going to refer to it, which was all 3 books in one. In fact, all the Fostered books are the exact same way they were years ago. And that was 6 years ago, except now book 3 is finished after I introduced a new character who reinvigorated the dynamic. So what happened between me really trying to publish and me just writing and doing absolutely none of that? I can't give you an exact timestamp for when my mindset shifted from I really want to publish this to so I want to write the story for myself because I love it. From all the heartache I'd experienced as a very young writer learning about the industry to hitting what was to this very date the lowest point of writing the series, I began prioritizing story over publication. Maybe it was that scare I'd had when I realized I may never write with these characters who felt like lifelong partners and friends to me. Again, that highlighted my priorities for me. But that same year, I broke past the trilogy Fostered once was and made it 4 books, then 5, and then 6. From books 4 to 6, my choice not to publish these books deepened because I realized it isn't the enjoyment of other people that makes these books worth writing for me. It's my own enjoyment that makes it worth it. When I'd given up on book 3, I was still so stressed about publishing and future audiences and future. It was literally all about the future. I lost my enjoyment somewhere along the way, and I simultaneously lost my love for something I didn't think was possible for me to not love. At 14, I had already shelved many novels, but I never thought I'd be in the same position where I was thinking about shelving Fostered. Because Fostered was so special to me, it still is, and the taste of losing that relationship, it was a small taste. It was only a few months while I was writing book 3, but still, that was enough to change my view on publication. And so where am I now? I've now completed 7 books of the series, so 6 of the main series, and then 1 spin-off, which is Mothwork. And I'm now working on the 8th book, which is the 2nd book in the series, which is Feeding Habits. What made Fostered valuable to me was not that I would get it published, but that I loved it. Let's jump into some misconceptions and some truths about not publishing your work, and learning to love writing for yourself, and why I believe in many ways writing for yourself is the key to being a better writer. So let's chat misconceptions. And also, this is coming from somebody who is actively publishing their work in other avenues, such as poetry and short stories. I'm constantly publishing those in literary magazines. So I feel like it's interesting to reflect on both sides. The first misconception is that you write for yourself because you're insecure. Maybe you write for yourself because you still want to be published, but you've given up on that because maybe your writing is not good enough. Maybe that's what you've decided. My writing kind of sucks and I'm just going to write for myself. No, like at least for me, the decision to write for myself was an autonomous decision. Fully came from me going through a whole lot of shit with Fostered, almost giving up on it, and then realizing this was a lot more valuable, the series, to me privately than it is to me publicly if I can't finish it. I would much rather be able to write it and enjoy it just for me than have to give up on it so that I could share it with other people. So I definitely don't think that people who are writing for themselves are insecure. Some people just like writing for themselves. It's like a hobby. I am an artist. I do a lot of things. I am an artist. I'm a guitarist. I am a graphic designer. All of these things I do for myself. None of them are for career, and I absolutely adore it. But there's something strange when it comes to writing where people are like, you can't possibly be writing, because maybe that sounds like a miserable experience to people, just for fun. You have to be doing it to publish, right? You have to be doing it to share because you want success in some way. And I mean, that's not really true when it comes to at least this series for me. I certainly experience both. I love to be published in some avenues and I don't care to be published in others. And I think both of those things can coexist. So I'm definitely not insecure about my work. Actually, Fostered is probably like my magnum opus, probably the best thing I've ever produced, not because it's technically great, like in terms of craft, but because I've stuck with it for so long and it's taught me so much. I feel like that's what a magnum opus is. It's your masterpiece for a reason, and Fostered is my masterpiece for the exact reason that I will never ever learn as much as I did when writing that series. So the next misconception I wanted to chat about is that the quality of the work you produce if you write for yourself is worse. So this is a really interesting one because I think it makes sense. Like when somebody's thinking, oh, that person's writing for themselves, their work probably sucks because they're not worried about what other eyes will see. For some people, and in some instances, even for me, this is still true. If nobody is going to be looking at it, there is intrinsically less pressure. But for the majority of the time, at least in my experience, I'm more meticulous with the work that I produce for myself because I understand my value as a writer and I know when or when I should not push myself. When it comes to Feeding Habits, which is the current novel that I'm working on, it is not going to be published. I never want it to be published. I mean, unless Netflix comes to me and is like, we love this, you need to publish it now and then we'll give you a TV show, like I'm not gonna publish it. And Netflix is never gonna do that. The work that I produce in Feeding Habits is the most edited work that I have ever produced. A lot of the work that I get published is first drafts, if not near first drafts. At least so far, I've only had a handful of stories that need more than 3 drafts max. I don't bother trying to fix something that ain't broke, like with the short stories, for example. Not to say that all of the prose that I write in Fostered is broken and disgusting, which is why I spend so much time editing it. No, it's because I have a really specific vision with Fostered, and I know what I need to do to attain that. And I care about how good quality it is. One of the weirdest, and it's a nice compliment, but it's not something I ever expected. One of the strangest comments that I get since I started my YouTube channel and I've been opening up to you guys about what I'm writing is, I think it's just amazing that you're putting so much time into something like that's just for you. Thank you to the people who have said that to me in the past. But it's not something I was ever expecting to hear when I started my platform. Because I was like, is this not what people do? Like, do people not create for themselves, just for the pure enjoyment that they will get? I grew up a really creative child, and I think my whole life I've been creating things to entertain myself. That's just how my brain works. And so it's what's been really normal to me. And so when I'm writing Fostered, you can bet that that prose is going to be just as good, if not better, than the prose in the stories that I publish. Like, you can't really compare them because I feel like they're on equal playing field. The reason why I can write good prose in my short stories is because of Fostered. It's because I spent years, like I think Fostered is turning 7. I spent so many years writing these books, and I've spent so much time honing my prose in that series that there's no way that I'd be as good as a writer and as accomplished as I am without that series. I don't think we should ever make a blanket statement. Like, if you write work for yourself, it is going to be bad. Those things don't compute. Some people, when they're writing for themselves, will write things that aren't as quality as they would be if they were publishing them. Some people are the opposite. Like me, I do both. I genuinely care about the quality of all of the books that I write because I think that I should love them not based on how publishable they are, but how much I care about them. If I'm writing anything, it's going to get the same amount of love, no matter what. And the next misconception is writing for yourself is easy. And this is something that I've recently, like very recently, like this year, had to really grapple with. When I started writing Feeding Habits, I thought it was going to be so much easier. And it's the same thing with Mothwork. Mothwork was, again, supposed to be my fun project. It literally had no stakes. The prose didn't matter. But I couldn't write it as a fun project. I was taking it so seriously. I didn't understand how to write it like it was fun because I was still taking something that I wrote for myself very seriously. I'm just that kind of a person. I take everything I do. I'm very extra, probably to a fault. I thought that it was going to be easy. Like one day I would just wake up and I'd be able to write 5,000 words in a day and I wouldn't care how any of it turned out and I would just do it and my brain would be able to keep up. But that's not the truth. I think writing for yourself may be one of the hardest things you'll ever do as a writer because it requires you to fully rely on you. And it can be really difficult to wager that and to learn how to trust yourself. My anxiety usually makes it impossible for me to not overthink when I'm writing, even when I'm writing for myself. Setting realistic goals is always really helpful. I was wondering if you wanted like a tip video for writing for yourself or like writing with like extreme anxiety because, oh, I have experience. I'll link a blog post though where I talked about my experience with writing Mothwork and what I found helped versus what was not helpful. What I wrote in that blog post was, it's not as easy as just telling yourself, well, no one's gonna read it, or, but I'm not publishing this, etc. I still have these anxieties now, and sometimes they can be debilitating. The best thing you can do in a situation like this is to try to write as close as you can to the moment. Try to write at times where you're less prone to overthink. For me, this is late at night or very early in the morning. During the day, I'm more cognizant and thus more prone to like really overthinking my work. And if you feel yourself dipping into these thoughts, take a break. That was just a little bit of advice. I will link that blog post. But let's now talk about some truths, which are at least very true for me. But the first one is that writing for yourself teaches you to value yourself as a writer and to prioritize your needs. In the beginning of writing, I feel like it's really normal to write with an audience in mind. The initial audience I thought of was my family. I didn't want people who knew me to experience my work in general because I was worried what they would think. This eventually manifested into me worrying about what the general public as well would think. I think a lot of us in the beginning tend to romanticize success. And even myself, the last few days, I've been thinking, I'm just gonna write a YA novel and like get really famous, even though like I don't currently write YA. I'm kind of working on a YA project right now, but I'm not talking about it right now. But anyway, and these are like daydreams, essentially. I've definitely daydreamed about having a movie deal, about being on the New York Times bestselling list and stuff like that. Our idea of success is really laden in the idea of being known. This is really normal. But intrinsically harmless daydreams, like I mentioned, like with the movie deal, can actually, in my experience, manifest in some tough anxieties that begin to dictate the way that you write. Suddenly, instead of writing a story that you were really excited about, you're shelving the idea, thinking it's too simple, or it's already been seen before, you've already written something too similar, or it's the wrong genre, or it doesn't have a genre, so it's not going to be marketable, so on and so forth. So no one is going to look at you if you write that project. I'm not going to be known if I write this project, and my idea of success is that I am known, so I'm not going to succeed if I'm not known. At the time, when I was writing Fostered, like the first 3 books, I wanted to be seen by the masses, but to do that, I had to do whatever it took to get me there, and unfortunately, along the way, sometimes we can lose what it means to write for ourselves because we're so focused on what other people will want. And like I said, some people really love that. They really love writing for other people. And so this video is not for you, but for the people who have been struggling with balancing your inner voice telling you, but what about your audience? What about your audience? This is the video for you. When we have an idea as creators that we're eventually going to be seen or watched, there's this kind of panoptic power almost that overcomes us when we're in private. I feel watched even though I'm literally in my kitchen and nobody can see me. It's just me and just my laptop. And sometimes I couldn't let go of the fact that someone else was going to, even if that was not necessarily true, see the work. So I'd tailor the work for the prospective eyes of the viewers that didn't even necessarily exist. The moment we let go of phantom audience, I argue, is an act of radical self-love. It's saying I care so much about myself as a writer and my process as a writer that I won't let the prospective eyes of a viewer stop me from writing what makes me happy. Like for me, of course I care about my readership, but the reader that matters the most is myself. I am a reader of my work and I matter too, as well as the other readers, but I want to please myself first. So instead of an external force validating our enjoyment of writing, we finally accept that the love of one person, the love of the self, is enough. And so therefore, you will be able to write what serves your needs and not the needs of others, which is so important when crafting a writer's identity. I found that I really struggled to understand what my identity was as a writer when I was really just trying to rush and trying to publish and really writing for other people and not writing for myself. When I began writing for myself, I understood what I liked, what made me happy, my tastes, and why I liked my own writing style and what made my style special and what made my writing identity unique from everybody else's, because everybody who's a writer has a different experience, and writing for myself really helped me uncover that. Sorry if the frame looks different, I had to switch out my SD card. So I also wanted to note that you can actually have both, like the best of both worlds, but especially when starting out, trying to focus more on how you perceive your own work rather than how others perceive it may help in organizing how you situate yourself as a writer and how you situate yourself toward your writing. Writing for yourself also allows you to learn what you like in writing, not necessarily what you think others will like in your writing. Learning to write for myself allowed me to better love my work because I didn't have to feel judged if I said, oh, I'm writing this and I love it. And then somebody was like, more so I was escaping judgment from myself. Nobody was judging me, but I was judging myself. And I think it's also important to note that an act of self-value, an act of self-love is a skill that needs to be learned and also practiced. So it fluctuates constantly. I still struggle with worrying what other people are thinking about my work or will think about my work. So sometimes I'm like, what will my workshop think about this? What will my friends think about this? What will so-and-so think? I still struggle with this. It is not something that you learn and then you're like, okay, I just write for myself and it's not a problem. At least in my experience, maybe for you. If you are, comment down below because I want to congratulate you because you're amazing. But I can't sustain loving everything that I write or just writing for myself. I still struggle with judging myself internally. Don't you love when you have no space on your SD card, so then you have to replace it again? So my next point is that writing for yourself gives you a space to practice, which is integral for growth. Because you're writing for yourself, you can try new things out that you may not have otherwise. So you have so much room to experiment, to do really strange things that might not otherwise have boded well with other people. For example, in my poetry workshop, there was like really divisive reactions to second person. I personally love second person, so I don't care regardless. If I'd just been thinking about what other people were thinking, I would have just stopped writing second person. But it's just so subjective, like it doesn't matter. Practice also literally makes perfect. And now when you write for yourself, you have the room to practice whatever and whenever you want. So growth comes from, I believe, mistakes. And writing for yourself means that there aren't necessarily dire consequences to those mistakes. You can make mistakes from the comfort of your own home. And it's kind of comforting, especially I think when you're starting out. When you write your first novel, you're going to make a whole bunch of mistakes. Nobody knows what they're doing when they write their first novel. I'm literally writing my 11th novel right now. I have no idea what I'm doing. It's great to make mistakes while you're writing just for yourself. Nobody else necessarily has to see those mistakes. It's just you. Writing for others, on the flip side, is great because it can turn into success, which in the modern world is being seen in some sort of way. It's an external sort of thing. But writing for yourself, I think, serves internal growth. And I'm not saying that those things are mutually exclusive, but I think a balance of both is what most writers are looking for. You can really, like I said, develop your writing identity, internal stuff, when you're writing for just yourself. My third and final point for this video is that writing for yourself teaches you to slow down. Since I started not writing for other people, I found that I am so content with taking things slow or deciding what pace I want to go at. Some people want to still write fast when they're writing for themselves. For example, I'm going to be trying to do that more this summer, more of like fast drafting. But I think you do have an added freedom that you can just slow down. There are no expectations for anybody that you need to put out work now. So instead of rushing to publish and get the reaction of others, you may be content with the reaction of yourself. And I'm not saying that that's why people publish, but at least for me, I know that I really wanted to get published because I wanted reactions from my work. But then when I learned to just write for myself, I was totally content with just having my own reaction. If I loved it, that was enough for me. And I'm not saying that that's perfect. I actually hate a lot of the things that I write, and it's still something that I'm working on. The only expectation you have is from yourself, which is where I personally struggle because I can be mean to myself. Instead of me being mean to myself and then worrying about what other people think, I no longer really have to worry as much about what other people think, even though my anxiety doesn't allow me to do that fully. I make an attempt. So sometimes that might mean you expect yourself to write a book in a month, and that's okay. And sometimes it means that you're okay taking however long it takes to write a draft. Whatever it is, writing for yourself allows you more room to make that decision for yourself because you don't have to be as much on a timeline. With publishing, there's more of a timeline that you have to follow, but with writing for yourself, there literally is no timeline unless you make one. And that's personally why I like it. There's a lot of freedom. And I think when you're starting out as a young writer or a new writer, writing for yourself is really important in building up that muscle. Nobody is ever going to write something for the first time ever, and it's going to be perfect. If you're a writer and you manage to write a novel that's fantastic on the first go, yeah, I'll just quit. So that's going to be today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed me rambling about why I love writing for myself, because I'm fantastic and I have value and I know my value and I love my work. Even if it's not published, it still has so much value, if not more value, because I love it more, because I have more emotional investment when I write for myself. So that's the end of this video. I will see you guys in another one. Bye. So guys, these are all the books that I wrote for myself. There are actually more. Here's one version of I'm Disappointed out of all the 4,000 ones that I own. Yep, I wrote these all for myself.
I want to thank me. I want to thank me for believing in me. I want to thank me for doing all this hard work.